So the first thing I want to say is that all of these three things, therapy, counseling, and coaching, have something in common. And what they have in common is that they are all trying to provide a helpful relationship. And that helpful relationship supports the client's health and growth. And all three do that via a neutral and a non-prescriptive approach. All of these are extremely effective. The only difference is that coaching is relatively new. This is a question that, as Anamika has asked, we come across this question all the time. And it's taken me quite a lot of time and effort and research talking to some really top experts, both in therapy and in counseling and in coaching, to try and distinguish and try and see, what is it that we are really trying to do. So bear with me for a couple of minutes while I walk you through this slide step by step. So the first thing I want to say is that all of these three things, therapy, counseling, and coaching, have something in common. And what they have in common is that they are all trying to provide a helpful relationship. And that helpful relationship supports the client's health and growth. And all three do that via a neutral and a non-prescriptive approach. This is very important. There is the concept of a helpful relationship. There is the concept of supporting the client, but we do this through a neutral and a non-prescriptive approach. So whether it is therapy or counseling or coaching, this is common. But there are certain differences which I would like to share with all of you today. And if you look at the left-hand side of the screen where I've put down various criteria, like say formality. So if you compare the three, you will find that in therapy, there is a high degree of formality. It's a clinical science, and therefore it is process-oriented. There is a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. The formality is high, whereas when you come to counseling, the formality is a little low. And coaching, on the other hand, is a pretty informal approach. And in that informality, there are some great advantages. So that, for example, is one of the differences between the three when you look at formality. Then if you look at regulation, obviously therapy, again, because it's a science, and people qualify it, spend many years to qualify for it. The regulations in the space of therapy are high, whereas in counseling, the regulations are a little less strict, if you like. And in coaching right now, it's a relatively new field. So the field of coaching has to depend upon self-regulation. And again, there are some great advantages here when you think about self-regulation. Then if you take the next criteria, which is depth, as I said before, therapy is clinical, counseling is semi-clinical, and coaching, we are very clear, is non-clinical. As I said before, coaching does not enter the medical or the clinical space at all. We focus very much more on the human or the emotional side of things. And you can actually now see how the picture forms, that when you look at the approach, therefore, that therapists take, the approach is to address the roots of the problem. You will say, look, there is a surface issue, there is a symptom, let's see what the issue is, let's see what the roots are, and really go deep into finding, identifying, addressing those roots. Whereas from what I have seen talking to some really good counselors, the counseling approach focuses not so much on getting to the depth of it, but focuses on really providing some coping strategies that the client can use. Whereas coaching actually does not look at addressing the roots. That is the therapist's area of expertise. It's not just about the coping strategies. What coaching tries to do is to shift the client's perspective. Basically, if they are thinking about cancer and their treatments and their experience in one way, can we get them to shift their mindset about it? That's the primary purpose. And therefore, if you look at the orientation that therapists take versus counselors versus coaches, then the therapist usually looks at what aspects in your past have brought you to where you are today, and to disentangle and to deal with some of those issues. Whereas, broadly speaking, the counseling fraternity, the counseling experts focus on where are you today and what can you do about getting to the future. And in that extent, to that sense, coaching is the same as counseling, which is it has a present to future orientation. And when you look at the duration, you find that therapy is, because of all the stuff that I have described before, therapy is usually a long process. Whereas counseling, the duration of the process is not as long as therapy is. And we find that in coaching, there is a set duration, it's a pretty short duration. And so, what coaching does, therefore, is that it fills up a certain gap that was left in terms of helping people with certain kinds of issues that perhaps therapy and counseling may not be ideally suited for. So I just want to close once again by saying that I've tried to identify what are the common elements, what are the differentiators, but perhaps the most important thing that I want to say is that all of these are extremely effective. The only difference is that coaching is relatively new.